is our craft supervisor. Is that your
Correct.
title? Okay.
Yep.
And Becky, how long have you been at APT?
This is my 13th season, but non-consecutive season.
Okay, lucky 13. And what jobs have you done so far? Like, have you always been the craft supervisor?
I have not always been the craft supervisor. My first year here was 1995, back when we were still in the barns.
Yeah.
And I was the costume shop assistant. I did a lot of ordering, phone ordering because there was no internet. Phone ordering. I drove to Madison a lot to get supplies. And I was just kind of the assistant to help out where help was needed in the costume shop. And then I came back in 2004 as the craft supervisor.
Okay.
And then I left again and got a year-round job at a theater in Alabama. And then in 2012, Michael Bro called me because the then craft supervisor was only going to be here half a season. And so he was like, hey, can you come fill in for the second half? And I was like, absolutely. And of course, that then craft supervisor was one of my crafts people when I was here in 2004. So we already knew each other. And then I stepped in 2012. And then, of course, Dana was back to her regular job. And so I was just a craft artisan for a few more years. And then Dana left, and now I'm the craft supervisor again.
Wow. I didn't know all that. This is great. This is great for me too, because then I get to learn more stuff. So, and where are you when you're not at APT?
When I'm not here, I am in St. Louis. I am adjunct faculty at Webster University in the Sargent Conservatory of Theater Arts. So I teach a couple of classes, and I'm the assistant costume shop manager there.
And then you come here in the summer.
And then I come here in the summer.
It works out.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Cool. So I'm going to ask you for real people, show of hands, how many of you understand what crafts are in relation to theater? Okay, a couple of you do. So Becky, please illuminate us. What are crafts and what are not crafts?
I do this trick question with my students often. So when we're talking about costume crafts, which is what I do, we're talking about the part of the costume that doesn't necessarily belong on a hanger. So it's not the dress or the shirt or the trousers or the jacket. It's the shoes, the neckties, the jewelry, the armor. We do a lot of armor here. The masks, the oddball stuff that doesn't quite go on the hanger. Even though we do hang it up so it stays nice and isn't just thrown in a corner, it's not your typical hanger items, does that make sense? So looking around, I'd be in charge of a lot of eyeglasses and sunglasses today and hats. No, actually not hats. Not hats.
Because that's separate.
So luckily here at APT, we are lucky enough to have a separate milliner, the hat guy. Most regional theaters do not have a separate milliner. So when I'm here, it's so wonderful that I don't have to worry about any of the hats. Michael Hanson, who's been here, I think, 38 or 39 years, does all the hats. But generally, under the umbrella of crafts, hats would normally fall there. But not here, luckily. I have enough to deal with armor.
So, yeah. It's a lot of stuff.
It is a lot,
and
of
it's
stuff.
a huge variation. We'll get into more.
Get into
more of that. Can you tell us about your staff? Yeah, who works
so aside from the milliner, since he's in his separate room, there's myself. I have a specific painter dyer person who does any surface treatments to the fabrics or to the garments, dyes the fabric to a specific color. And I'll show you some interesting things in a minute. But does the painting and dyeing of the costumes or the fabric before it becomes a costume. And then I have 2 craft artisans that work for me in the shop. And so they get to do, help with the armor or do, like I think for Sense and Sensibility, one of those poor girls had to make like 14 cravats. For Sense and Sensibility, because they needed to be longer than normal cravats, so we couldn't pull them out of the box. So yeah, I have 2 craft artisans, myself and a painter dyer.
And do your craft artisans specialize? Like I know in props, there's one person that just does paper props.
Right. Not so much here. Sometimes I have somebody in the room that has a lot of background in armor or leather work or something else. A lot of times those people, they're like, oh, I really like painting and dyeing, or I really like making hats. And unfortunately, I have a painter dyer and we have a hat person. So yeah, not specifically like, yes, in props, there's a paper goods person, there's an upholstery person.
Yeah.
You know,
So you all kind of work together.
So we all kind of work together, yeah.
Cool. Well, can you talk us through your process for the season? So, like, when does your contract starts, like, in April?
My contract this year started, I was on property May 2nd or 3rd, whatever that Tuesday was. Mm-hmm. And I'll be here through August 20th, I think is my last day of contract. But before that, we have design conference. Mm-hmm. Traditionally, we all come together here on property to do that, but because of COVID times, we've been doing those Zoom over the last couple of years. So during that process, design conference, specifically for costumes, it will be a meeting of our costume director, Scott, the costume designer for whichever play, the wig and makeup director, the milliner, myself, and the draper for that show, who is the person that makes all the patterns to make the pretty dresses and make the pretty clothes. So we all come together and go through the show character by character, actor by actor, to find out what their needs are and what happens. And then I say, hey, that looks like some armor there. What do I need to know about that armor? Or it might be just, necktie and shoes. And I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of an easy one. So we go through all 8 shows sometime in March. It's usually like mid-March.
Right, yeah.
We go through all the shows. So I have kind of a preliminary idea of what I'll be doing when I arrive in May. And then when we get to May, something has probably changed.
Definitely, yeah.
Whether that be casting or a brand new idea has come to somebody's mind or something. Generally, what that first meeting is for is to give an overall sense of the scope of the play for as far as costumes, wigs, and makeup, but also to keep the designer in check. Like, no, we talked about 1 set of armor. We didn't talk about 8 sets of armor. So no.
How often is that is that like just always, or
no, it's
different
not.
designers or different?
I think it's for designers that have been with us for years and years and have been here a long time, except for maybe Rachel Healy. No, I'm not going to throw her under the bus.
Not to name names, but
no, they get it and they know what the process is, and they've been here and they've done that, and so they know not to show up in a couple of months and add a bunch of builds to the draper or a bunch of builds for me. Occasionally, it's something either specific that the director has decided, you know what, I really want to do this thing, and we try to say yes to all those things within reason. Sometimes it's a negotiation. It's like, okay, instead of 1 set, I'll do 8 sets of armor. But that means that perhaps those 8 sets of armor are simplified rather than...
Or something you can pull... Whoops.
Uh-oh, she went mute.
Okay.
Don't mute Sarah.
Okay. Did it die? It died. Yeah. I mean, it's not like they can't... I can talk loud enough. But, yeah, so maybe it's something you'll pull from stock and modify or something.
So there is some negotiation. And I always think, like, when I'm, like, kind of estimating out time and what we have versus what we're going to have to build and things like that. Like I keep in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, this is, 20% of this is going to change somewhere, somehow, some way. So, and then, it's not unlike me to offer to do more than I agreed to in March. which is
Right.
what like last year was Cymbeline. Like they were gonna buy all the armor for the women, and I was like, no, I'll make it. I have plenty of time, and so I made all the armor for the women.
And did that end up being an okay choice?
That was a good choice because originally they wanted to use metal.
Oh.
Real actual like metal armor on these 8 women, and no, you can't modify it. You can't make it's not light. It's oily, so it doesn't rust, and which would get on the bad idea. So I was like, let me just make the armor, and it will do exactly what we want it to do, and it won't hurt anybody.
Yeah. So that's a good call. That brings up though, like what materials, can you talk about some of the materials that you often work in? I mean, I know there's so many different items, but what comes up?
It's such a broad.
It is.
It's so broad. I mean, there's quite a bit of leather that happens in that shop, whether it be just belts or sword belts, or for instance, like this is covered in leather. All this armor's covered in leather. So leather is a big one. Other than that, I mean,
it can be anything.
It can be anything. Like for instance, if anyone saw Seascape and the lizards that were from Seascape a few years ago, I think that was 2015,
something like that.
Like there was a lot of weird happening there. But
and did that take you a while to figure out how, like, were you involved in the process with the designer of figuring out how the heck we're going to do that?
Yeah.
How many of you saw Seascape and know what we're talking about?
Lizards?
Most of you.
Yeah. So Devin had done the drawing and then left it to us to figure it out, which is, is good. It's sometimes counterproductive to have the designers try to do the engineering.
Yeah.
Got it. Let us worry about how it works. We'll make it look like and function the way it needs to, but it'll look like what you want. So in that case, so their actual bodysuit was the Draper. So that was Rose Kazmarowski. So she had to figure out the bodysuits for Christina and LaShawn. And then the craft shop dealt with their hoods, their heads, the tails, and their weird fingers. And so we kind of broke that down. Like I was on tail duty. Andrea was on hands, and Dana did most of the head stuff. Yeah. So.
And what did you end up using? It was some sort of latex or?
So the bodysuits themselves are just like a spandex kind of all-in-one unitard that was stretchy. Their hoods were also spandex and some stretchy mesh. It was like a combination of fabrics. And we used a product by a company called Smooth On, called Dragon Skin, to kind of paint on and give it a little texture. And then, and that's what helped us make the extra long fingers. The tails were super low tech and simple. Like all that was inside the tails was a string with pieces of foam. We got like rods of foam of different circumference, and I basically ran a piece of string through larger, smaller, down to the tail. Oh, cool. And as they moved, the tail followed them like it should. I was like, low tech wins.
Yeah.
I mean, because who wants to try and get in there and fix something high tech? No one.
Right.
And so, because when we started thinking about it, I was like, let's try the stupidest, easiest way to do it first. Let's not over-engineer tails.
Yeah.
So it worked out.
Cool. I see you brought some show and tell.
I did bring some show and tell.
Can you want to show us and tell us?
I would love to show and tell. Do I have a volunteer that would like to wear the ghost of Hamlet's father's armor?
There we go.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So I'll kind of talk through these pieces as I'm going. I'm gonna have to
just talk.
Are
we okay?
We're okay.
If we do that, okay.
Okay. So we start with the greaves for Hamlet's ghost, and we have rightfully labeled them right and left, so nobody gets them backwards. So this particular piece there's plastic inside there. It's kind of a lightweight plastic. It's been lined with like headliner foam and then covered with leather. And then these are just like fabric appliques that have been glued on, again, low tech. All this stuff, there's some buckles here. This is some industrial felt covered in leather. And then it's been painted, and the moss, all this moss, is actually yarn, right? Okay. So it looks cool, but it's kind of like, go to the craft store, get things. So we always do, and we tell everyone up the hill, boots before corset. So we're going to put that one on because it is really hard. Oop, I'm going to lift. There you go. To put some of these pieces on after the corset goes on, and we're going to pretend the breastplate is the corset. I'm not going to do all of the buckles. For time reasons.
No, David Daniel was wearing this just last night, so I mean it's aired out for a while.
Yeah. I actually had okay. it. I actually did some repairs on it this morning before I came up.
How long does it take to get that on? Because the guy's on several different parts.
It takes a few minutes. I mean, they are very good at their jobs.
The dressers.
The dressers that dress him. He doesn't have to do it himself.
Becky, what kind of things break?
Good question.
Actually, just the other night for opening night of Hamlet, a belt buckle broke. So Jamal James, who is Laertes, had to do the first part of the show without his belt because the actual buckle disintegrated. Luckily, I had 4 more in the shop, and so I could put a new buckle on his belt. But so that kind of thing breaks. Sometimes this kind of thing can break, but it's also fairly easy to fix. There's not a whole lot of actual structure in there. There's a couple rivets. How you feeling?
It's really light.
So this is breastplate. This is plastic. This is actually the plastic that is in your aircraft, your tray table and your overhead compartment. That's what this is. And if you felt it, you'd recognize that sensation of the inside of the airplane.
How is it moldable?
There's a company that made this one. It's called Costume Armor. And they make this particular shape. They make the ones with like the 6-pack. They make plain. They make back plates. They make helmets and pauldrons, and they make all different kinds of things. Saves us a lot of time and money. And then we can shape this with a heat gun if we need to. It's soft enough that if I needed to cut out the arm's eye a little bit more for movement, I could do that. But in any case, this is plastic. It's been painted on the inside. We've covered it with leather to give it a good paint surface. And then again, it's appliques and yarn for moss. And then just for grins, this comes out. I made this for, this was also used in Pericles a couple years ago. I don't know if you remember that piece of armor from Pericles, but it's been repurposed.
That's cool.
So this,
You said you would cut out the armholes. Like what tools are kind of your go-to? Oh, you're.
Well, I need to buckle.
Good. Looks good.
You're
there.
okay. You're fine.
What are some of your go-to tools that you use, Becky?
I use, I have a great pair of craft scissors that I love. Okay, you're in. And you're like, woohoo! Great. A great pair of craft scissors that I love. Pliers, screwdrivers. A good hammer.
Yeah.
All right, so this is a good demonstration of what our painter dyer does. This is the cape. So all these little faces have been, I don't know if you can see them. Can you see those faces? They've been felted. It's wool roving that she felted onto the cape. And then she took some of the yarn that I used for the moss and needle felted that onto the cape. And then there's some paint. Yeah. And some of this light color paint down here is something that Dee Dee picked up walking around backstage. And so we added more.
Dee Dee, David Daniel.
Yeah, David Daniel.
Yep.
All right, so
We
now
all
we have...
call him Dee Dee, and then sometimes at like events like this, we like have to clarify it.
So now that No, you're all right. Just let me... Oh, I had someone think that it was Brian Monty.
Yeah,
As
I
it
don't
goes.
know. I mean, I think it's just like, does he have anything that, are his shoes particularly high or anything, Becky?
Nope.
Do you know? It's just his manner, I guess.
It's the crown. There's an
The
armhole
crown,
right there.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh my
Got
gosh,
it.
that looks amazing.
All right, we're getting there. All right. So we have a cape, we have a breastplate, and his greaves. Then his gorget goes on.
Oh yes, the gorget, of course.
Gotta have your gorget.
You gotta have your gorget. Wow, look at.
What is the purpose of a gorget?
This is, so in real life armor, this is neck protection, right? So that a sword doesn't get into your soft bits. And then what we have, and I've brought my screwdriver.
Wow.
Dandy screwdriver.
Yeah. Do. All right, so I'm gonna just
Oh.
Oh, to hold it in place.
hold it all in place.
Oh wow.
come prepared.
So it's actually screwed in.
Yeah, this is what we call a Chicago screw. I don't know what else it's called. I've learned it my whole life as a Chicago screw. It's like a rivet. All right, so now we're getting there. We're almost done. And then we have the pauldrons. Again, it's industrial felt covered with leather.
What is it called, Becky? The
pauldron.
pauldron.
The shoulder armor.
Okay.
All right, so this is your right shoulder. I'm gonna actually go right here. You hot yet?
Not too bad. Can't imagine acting in this.
I know.
I know. Plus he's got pants and long sleeve shirt. And this is the left guy. I'm gonna go right up here again.
Yeah, this would get really warm.
Yeah. All right. And there's the ghost of Hamlet's father,
Yay.
right? So, yeah.
He looked much blacker. Did he have tights on?
Yeah, so what he wears under this, he's got a black long sleeve shirt and black trousers and black shoes. And then he's got gloves. He does have gloves that kind of mimic all of this. And then plus his
The helmet.
ghost makeup
yeah.
and crown.
So you never
Right.
seen any normal skin.
No.
Talk about the mask over the eye. That was really clever.
So that's a makeup trick. And I think it's I don't know what makeup did. I think it's like a scrim or something that's been kind of just glued so he can see through it, but you can't see in. But yeah, that was a makeup.
So yeah, because
Trick.
that would be, so makeup would be with
me to take my-
wigs. She gave it back.
Sure.
Oh, please.
Now that it's opened, we can have a photo, I think.
Yeah. Hannah's been taking some photos too. Yeah.
So how many collective hours would you say goes into a costume, like your portion of this costume?
Okay, so we had the breastplate, so I didn't have to make that, but I had to kind of refurbish it. This was brand new, and these were brand new, and the tabs are brand new, and we kind of refurbished. That's probably a week
Of detail work.
of work between 4 people. So what is that? 160 hours, probably in it.
Yeah.
120, 160 hours in it, I would think.
Is that one of the more complex things you had to do?
So yeah, the reason I brought this is because this is probably our biggest collective build for the season. Sometimes, crafts, it has a lot of work. Like it might be 8 sets of armor for something like Troilus and Cressida,
Yeah.
or just a lot of different stuff. This year, this was our biggest thing. The second half there's not as much going on. We're making some bunny slippers for Raisin in the Sun because we can't find 1950s bunny slippers anywhere. I don't know why.
In perfect condition.
And good condition. And the boys that are cast actually have adult men's-sized feet.
Oh.
And so I've found a downloadable stuffed bunny pattern, and we've got like 3 different size heads to try on shoes that I will probably slip cover. We got some terry cloth towels, which are going to be really great for that.
So should we get this young woman out?
Yeah,
of
you want to get out of that now?
Now that we know that you fit the suit, you will be David
can be
Daniels understudy.
the understudy.
Now, from now on. For the rest of the season.
I don't think I project as well. Probably wouldn't remember the lines. Oh, but there aren't a lot of lines, though.
That's
Do
true.
actors ever complain about maneuverability when they're in some of these things?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Becky, can you talk about fittings?
They
and how
do. They don't complain. They have concerns, right? Like I have to climb up this ladder, and so then we figure out how to do the climbing up the ladder, and make it as easy for them as possible. There you go.
And sometimes you have to modify the costume.
And sometimes we'll have to like change tack, or we'll have to say, if this is really the look you want on the costume, maybe climbing the ladder isn't the thing.
Right.
So then we have those discussions.
Choices.
Oh,
Yeah.
You got it? Great. And just that one. Yep. Ta-da! Back to my normal self.
All right. Thank you so much.
So yeah, we don't have. They don't complain. They bring up their concerns and they're like, "Hey, they're having me do somersaults, or what have you," and so then we might have to modify something somewhere.
Yeah.
Make it out of softer things. Like for instance, the armor last year for Cymbeline was all soft, like those pauldrons were, so that when the women really got fighting, they weren't gonna jab themselves with something hard like the plastic of the breastplate. Mm-hmm. So
you modify it.
we modify stuff and we change. That's why we don't do metal.
Yeah.
So do actors ever wear ice packs?
Sometimes, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's a really nice day. I can't imagine being that when it's 90.
But also, our core company, they've gotten acclimated to being out on that stage, and they know what they can tolerate. We haven't done ice packs all the time, but they've gotten used to doing this thing. And God bless them, because also the mosquitoes out there.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah. They do use ice packs sometimes. They also, each play has is
plan.
required to have a heat plan and a cold plan, so that the costume designer knows that sometimes we'll have to go to the heat plan. So it's a plan that they sign off on, but then the stage manager would make the call that if there's certain conditions, it's based on humidity and temperature. If we go into a certain zone, they hi Pam, they have to do the heat plan. They have to adhere to the heat plan.
So like for instance, for this, if we were doing heat plan, he probably wouldn't put on his greaves. He probably would keep the gorget and the pauldrons off. The cape only stays on if the breastplate is on, so that would be a thing. But even that itself, cutting down just a couple of those layers, improves the situation tremendously.
And
so.
He's not on too long.
And he's not on too much.
Yeah.
Sadly, I would love to see this at nighttime, but it's so close to the top of the show.
Right. Yeah.
We don't get this.
There's amazing. We should, if you want to take a look afterwards, maybe those faces are amazing up close. I had no idea.
Yep.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
even when he's in the aisle. So.
Yeah. There's, I think, I want to say there's like 17 faces on there or something.
That's wild. That's awesome.
Well, they're just, I mean, he's a ghost, and, maybe he's picked up the souls of the
Other people.
others and the anguish and the pain. And so that's what, actually the designer printed out a bunch of pictures of people that looked like in anguish.
Oh, yeah.
Some of it was like there was one face of Sweeney Todd. I don't know if you know the story of Sweeney Todd, but it was it was like, you know, he's in anguish a lot during that. So that was like a model for one of them, and
Oh, cool.
yeah.
So do you also model the ornamentation on the chest plate and stuff from the story?
I mean, in this case, since I repurposed the breastplate from Pericles, we left the same embellishment, the same appliques that were on there. I should have brought the drawing for this. In this case, originally, the designer wanted a breastplate that had the six-pack abs in the chest thing. And we didn't have, we have some of those in stock. We didn't have one that was David Daniels size. We had them for like Chris Sheard. And so this was one of the options. And so we just modified the design a little bit to suit the piece of armor we had. And then I took the embellishments, because these greaves, when I pulled them out of stock, they were like gray and white and looked like some other kind of ghost of something. I don't know what they were from.
Maybe from the last time we did him.
But so I took all the stuff off there and added, we still had some more of that applique stuff. So I made the appliques kind of mimic what was happening on the breastplate. And suddenly we have a full set of armor for the ghost of Hamlet's father.
Nice.
How often do you go into your inventory, you know, reuse something for just
A lot. Yeah. A lot. For us to make everything from scratch, from start, because of the pace of what we're doing, would be really, really difficult to maintain. This craft shop itself, like, I can't speak for the for the draping teams, but for instance, like Heather, who was the draper for Hamlet, only had to worry about Hamlet. Becky, the craft supervisor, has to worry about Hamlet and Sense and Sensibility and Rivals and Brother Size and River Bride, all at the same time. So I can't, you know, necessarily build everything from scratch. So we pull stuff out of storage a lot, and then kind of modify it, rip it apart, put it back together.
how do you keep track of the inventory then, so that you know what you have and can say, well,
I tell you what,
can't imagine.
between Scott, our costume director, and Michael the milliner, they've been here 39 years. They know exactly what's
Scott
up
knows.
there.
Scott
They know
wrote,
everything.
for those of you who haven't met Scott Rote, who's our costume director. I mean, he's been here since APT's been here, pretty much. And he knows that stock like the back of his hand.
They know where everything comes from. They're like, oh, we're using that from blah, blah, blah in 2002. And I'm like, okay.
Right. Yeah, Arch.
So you're depending on his memory. Now, when he retires,
We're going to be, it's not going to be pretty. No.
Yeah.
They are starting to put barcodes and stuff. They're starting that process so that
Picture database?
I guess there will be a picture database. I don't know how. Again, I've got to worry about other things, but
I know that they're working on that.
They've been working on that.
Yeah.
That's something they started during downtime during COVID.
Yeah.
And there's enough pieces up there. It's going to take a while to get everything barcoded and tracked and.
When you're designing certain costumes that require stage lighting, are you able to actually mimic stage lighting in your shop so that you can get a picture of the effect yourself?
No. We can replicate the sun, which is great, right? We can go outside because a lot of times it will be like a matinee is going to be full sun. And for some of the other stuff, like the stuff that is at 10 o'clock at night that's showing up on stage outside, not so much. Or stuff that's inside the touchstone. Inside the touchstone, if we're really, really needing the light, the the circumstances that the light does, we can go over there and say, talk to the electrician or the lighting designer and say, hey, can you give us stage light for scene 12 so we can look at this thing to see what it's doing. Normally, that kind of thing, we just kind of have to wait until we're in tech rehearsals to see it happen and then go, oh, that thing is gray. It's not pink anymore.
And then you fix that
and then we fix
during
it.
that. That's why that we switch up 10 minutes.
Sometimes it's much easier to change a light gel than to perhaps find a whole new costume that's not going to look great. So there's a little bit of a negotiation there. I'm not going to say it's fun, but it's part of the job.
Tell us about your shop. Actually, I mean, your shop is one of those places that we built the Bravo Center in 2001, and it's like, oh my gosh, we have a craft shop, but talk about your space.
Is not enough.
It's not, yeah.
It is not
to put
enough.
It bluntly, it's about like
it's
like. Would you say it's about like these 4 squares here, like this little space? Is that big? Is that generous? Maybe.
That's about close. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
These 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, and 3 people here. The painter dyer has another 2 squares.
Yeah. Right.
It's a small space. I would love to have a bigger work table. We used to have in our room. We also used to have a spray hood, so we could do terrible, toxic, nasty things in the room with us, so we wouldn't have to travel to go around the corner. They finally took that out. We're glad because it opened up the space in that room.
Yeah. And now you go around the corner.
But now we go into the prop shop. Yeah. But it's still not enough space. I mean, there's 2 people sharing a table, and if there's anything that's large or it needs to stay pretty, I mean, the craft shop isn't the place to be if it has to stay really, really pretty. Luckily, we have a shared space up in the loft that we can lay out larger projects and keep them as clean as possible, until Samantha dyes them. Or
in the prop shop, or upstairs in the prop shop, yeah.
How big is your storage area for all this stuff? It's got to be in another building.
No, it's up. And I don't know if you've had the tour of the buildings. I don't know when we're doing those again.
Yeah, we're doing those this year. You should think about that.
It's a.
Let's see. I'm trying to think.
I would say, okay, if you imagine, then this isn't true. If the costume shop is 2 squares, we'll say, storage is probably about 1 square.
So yeah.
So the costume shop has full 2 squares, and then there's a loft space that's maybe about 1 square.
I mean, you're not saying it's actually this size.
No,
it's much
not
bigger.
actually.
The
That would
costume
be
shop,
crazy.
yeah, but like proportionally.
It's about.
I would say it's like definitely maybe as long as this structure.
At least.
Maybe probably a little longer. And then and several the racks are on top of each other, so there's like 3 stories of racks.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
It's crammed in there. We don't have space for much more.
No.
Where does the clothing go then?
That's the clothing too.
Clothing,
Everything.
Upstairs is like all the clothes, all the hats, all the shoes, all the armor, all the
shoes.
Yeah.
Did you say shoes?
I said shoes.
Okay.
Shoes, boots, belts.
Yeah.
There are also, if you were to go in the costume shop, there is hats all along the wall of the loft. They're just out so people can see them. There's some shelving up high.
Yeah.
That holds.
You'll see. You should the Inside Out tours. We are doing them. They're about this time on Saturdays, and it's definitely worth it to do the whole thing.
It's packed in there though, and the
Yeah.
costume shop in general is ready to burst and need more space.
So we had just like 5 or so more minutes. Other questions for Becky?
So, in the River Bride, is it the craft shop or the prop shop that does all of the jungle?
That's props. Yeah, and we also, Nate Stuber and I are good friends, and there's oftentimes it's like, not it. Like,
Yeah, Nate's the prop guy, the prop supervisor, I guess.
Because it's a funny thing, like props versus costumes. Like a parasol is a costume piece, crafts piece, but an umbrella is a prop. A walking stick is in props, but the costume designer has designed and picks out the walking stick that they want. A sword carrier is I have what we call frogs for all the rapiers to go in. That lives in the costume storage, but a gun holster would come from props. Right?
Is that industry, like, are these normal, like, this has been normalized across the industry?
That's pretty much that way.
Is there like a
across the board.
website or something?
No,
you
there
go
is
to
no.
to-
This is like learned by experience. Like
Okay.
like a handbag is like a little regular size purse is costumes, but a backpack will be props. A briefcase is props. A wallet is props. Glasses, right? I don't. Sure.
What do you do if you have an understudy that's a much different size?
So for the understudies, like I just fit Jim Ridge as the understudy for Dee Dee.
It is
Different.
different.
Gives Jim some bulk. Like it bulks Jim up quite a bit. But it all fits him. I mean, it's not so. This particular thing isn't so size specific.
Yeah.
That it wouldn't work on several people. For the actual costumes, though, if the actor or actress is too different in size, then we pull something out of stock. We, like, for instance, Tracy Arnold in The Rivals wears a complete purple ensemble. We'll find the closest thing to a purple dress for whoever, I think it's Sarah Day. We'll probably find Sarah Day's purple dress that she wore somewhere down the line and put Sarah Day in Sarah Day's purple dress. It won't look exactly like what Tracy's wearing, but it'll be, kind of a shadow of the thing.
And those of you,
What's that?
It would be consistent for that show.
right.
Yeah.
And those of you who are seeing Sense and Sensibility tonight, you'll see there's an understudy going on for Mary Ann, and the same
we
thing.
just had that
It's
fitting
like-
when I came up here.
It's a different pink dress, basically.
Yeah.
But in the same area. So Hannah's telling us it's time to wrap up. So thank you, Becky,
welcome.
and thank you all for coming.